It is early. You are not fully awake. Your eyes open halfway, and something is already looking at you. It sits at the edge of the bed. It has been awake far longer than you. It watched you sleep. It waited for you to come back. It is not human. It does not pay rent. It cannot tell you why it stays. And yet, of all the warm places in the world, it has chosen to be near you. Why does that feel so completely normal? You have done this your entire life. A dog at the door, a cat on the windowsill. An animal that shares none of your blood folded into your family anyway. You feed it before you feed yourself. You talk to it in a voice you would be embarrassed to use with another adult. You worry when it is sick. And not once have you stopped to ask how deeply strange this arrangement is. Here is what almost everyone believes about it. Keeping a pet is a modern softness, a luxury, a thing people invented once they had spare food, spare rooms, and spare money. A small comfort bolted onto a comfortable world. That is not quite right. The real answer is older and far stranger than the bed you are lying in. This bond is not new. It is older than your phone, older than your country, older than money, older than writing, older than the wheel that carried the first carts. It is older than the farm. Sit with that one. Somebody was sharing dinner with an animal before anyone on Earth had figured out how to grow dinner. The pet came before the field. To see how upside down that is, you have to stand inside the world it came from. Picture it. No supermarkets, no fences, no leftovers, because there is no such thing as a leftover when the next meal is never promised. Every calorie you own, you chased, dug, or carried. Hunger is not an event in this world. Hunger is the weather. It is always somewhere on the horizon, and often directly overhead. Into that world walk a wolf. Not a cartoon wolf, a real one. Bigger than the dog at your feet, all muscle and teeth and patience, built to bring down animals far larger than a person. Your ancestor and that wolf wanted the exact same scarce thing: meat. They were rivals. On a bad night, they were each other's danger. Now answer honestly. If you were starving and a large predator crept toward your fire in the dark, what would you do? You would drive it off. Of course you would. You would throw stones and shout until it melted back into the trees. That is the sane response. That is the response that kept your line alive. So here's the question this whole video is built on. Why didn't they? Why did some of them, somewhere, do the insane thing instead? Why did a hungry human look at a hungry predator and decide to share? For a long time, nobody could even agree on when it happened. The honest answer is that the bond is so old, it sits just past the edge of clear history, in the blur before farming. But the ground keeps handing up clues. In a quiet site near Bonn, in Germany, archaeologists recovered something that reset the whole conversation. A human and a young dog laid to rest together roughly 14,000 years ago. 14,000. That is thousands of years before the first wheat field, the first city, the first written word. Let that number land. Before humans planted a single seed on purpose, before they stacked the first brick of the first town, they were already burying an animal beside their dead. Not eating it, not using its skin, burying it, the way you bury someone you do not want to leave behind. And the animal in that grave was young, and it had been ill, cared for, kept alive through something it could never have survived alone in the wild. Somebody fed it when it could not feed itself. Somebody chose to spend scarce food on a creature that, by every cold rule of survival, they should have abandoned. That is not a hobby. That is not a luxury. That is attachment, 14,000 years deep, pressed into the dirt. And that single grave breaks the easy story in half. Because if this began with affection, with a person who simply could not let an animal die, then the comfortable modern idea collapses. The bond did not arrive with sofas and pet food. It arrived in the cold, among people who could least afford it, who gave anyway. But affection is only half of the puzzle, and maybe not even the larger half, because there is a second possibility, and it is the one that should unsettle you. What if it didn't start with a kind human reaching out to an animal at all? What if the animal reached first? What if you were not the one who decided? We picture our ancestor as the hero of this story, the brave one, the gentle hand that tamed the wild. It is a flattering picture. It is also, very possibly, backwards. Because the more closely researchers look at how this actually happened, the more it seems the first move was not made by a human at all. It was made by something out there in the dark, watching your fire, and deciding, for reasons of its own, to come closer. Who tamed whom? Hold on to that question. It is about to flip everything you assume about your place in this story. What if the bravest thing in this story was never done by a human? Picture the hero version again, because you have seen it 100 times. A rugged ancestor finds a wolf den. He lifts out a soft, whimpering pup. He carries it home, feeds it by hand, raises it gentle, and over the years bends a wild animal to his will. Man tames beast. It is a good story. It is on the cover of children's books, and it is almost certainly wrong. Here is the problem with it. Have you ever met an adult wolf? Not a dog, a wolf. People who raise wolves from blind newborns, bottle feed them, sleep beside them, do everything right, will tell you the same thing. The animal grows up wary. It does not melt into a pet. The wildness does not wash out with kindness. So the idea that a few prehistoric families hand-raised wolves into the loyal creatures at your feet runs straight into biology and loses. So if humans did not reach into the wild and pull the wolf out, how did the wolf get in? The biologist Raymond Coppinger spent his life on that question, and his answer turns the hero story completely inside out. He pointed at something every human camp produces and nobody wants: garbage. Think about what a group of humans leaves behind. Bones with marrow still inside, scraps of hide, half-gnawed joints, waste tossed to the edge of camp and forgotten. To you, that is trash. To a hungry wolf on a hard winter, that pile is a buffet that never runs out and never fights back. No chasing, no risk of a kick from a fleeing animal, just food, sitting there, beside the strange, upright apes and their fire. But there is a catch, and the catch is everything. To eat from that pile, a wolf has to do the one thing every instinct screams against. It has to get close to humans. It has to override its fear. Now here is where it gets beautiful. Not every wolf can do that. Some are too jumpy, too reactive. The moment a person shifts, they bolt, and they go hungry. But a few, by pure accident of temperament, are calmer, bolder. They can sit 40 feet from a fire and keep eating. And on a starving winter, the calm wolf that tolerates humans eats, while the nervous wolf that flees does not. Read that again, because it is the whole engine. The friendliest were not the weakest. They were the ones who survived. The trait that fed them was the ability to be near us without panic, and that trait gets passed down. Generation after generation, the calmest wolves stayed closest, ate best, and raised the most pups, who were calmer still. Nobody planned it. No ancestor sat down and selected for friendliness. The wolves selected themselves by who could stand to live in our shadow. Researchers have a blunt name for this idea: survival of the friendliest. The animal cognition researcher Brian Hare has spent years building the case that this, not human cleverness, is the real origin of your dog. Let that reframe sink in. You did not tame them. You did not even invite them. They moved in. They read us, they tolerated us, they fed on what we wasted, and slowly, across more lifetimes than you can picture, they turned themselves into something that could love a human. The first step toward your dog was taken by a wolf in the dark, choosing to stay. And here is the proof it was not a fluke. The wolf was not the only animal to run this exact play. Thousands of years later, when humans finally did start farming, they built something new and irresistible: stores of grain. Grain draws mice. Mice draw cats. And the calmest, boldest wildcats, the ones that could hunt those mice right beside people without bolting, ate best and bred most. The cat on your windowsill did not get carried out of the wild either. It walked in, on its own terms, hunting in the glow of our grain. Two different animals, two different eras, the same quiet decision. Come closer. And this rewrites your role entirely. You are not the trainer in this story. You are the habitat. You were the warm, dangerous, food-rich environment that an animal evolved to fit. That is a stranger kind of power than taming. You changed another species just by existing near it. But ask the obvious objection, because a skeptic in your comments is already typing it. If this was just scavengers eating garbage, where is the love? A rat eats your trash too, and you do not bury a rat beside your grandmother. Tolerating an animal at the edge of camp is not the same as letting it sleep against your chest. Cold convenience does not explain a creature you would grieve. That objection is fair, and it is exactly where the story stops being about food. Because somewhere along that long road, the relationship crossed a line. The animal stopped being a scavenger we tolerated and became a companion we chose. The wolf at the edge of the firelight came all the way in. When did that line get crossed? When did pure usefulness turn into something that looks, unmistakably, like family? You cannot read tenderness in a garbage pile. Affection does not fossilize. Or does it? It turns out there is one place where a feeling that old can still be touched. Not in a theory, not in a hunch. In the ground, in a single grave, where someone 14,000 years ago left behind proof of exactly how they felt. And what they buried changes everything. What does it take to make you carry something for the rest of your life? In 1914, quarry workers near the village of Oberkassel, just outside Bonn, were cutting into rock when they uncovered human bones. Two people, a man, older, a woman, younger, both laid down with care, dusted in red ochre, the deep earth pigment our ancestors reserved for the dead they honored. For decades, that was the story. Two ancient humans buried with dignity. The animal bones mixed in with them were treated as background noise. Nobody thought to look closely. Then, a century later, somebody did. A Belgian veterinarian and researcher named Luc Janssens took those overlooked animal remains and studied them the way a doctor reads a patient. And what he found rewrote the calendar of human affection. The animal in that grave was a dog, not a wolf, a young domestic dog, and it had been buried deliberately with two people roughly 14,000 years ago. 14,000 years. To feel that number, stack it against everything you call old. The pyramids are roughly 4,500 years old. The oldest written words? About 5. This grave is 3 times older than writing itself. And the dog in it was already a dog. But the date is not the part that should stop your breath. the teeth are. Janssens looked at the dog's teeth under magnification and saw scars in the enamel, the kind of damage left behind when a body fights a severe illness while it is still growing. The pattern matched canine distemper. If you have never seen distemper, here is what it does. It is a brutal viral disease. It brings fever, vomiting, dehydration, seizures. It blinds, it convulses. A young dog that catches it badly out in the wild dies, quickly and alone. There is no version of that animal surviving on its own. And yet, this one did. The enamel scars show not one bout, but signs of repeated illness. The dog got sick, badly, more than once, as a small puppy, and lived through all of it. Sit with what that requires. A convulsing, blind, dehydrated puppy cannot hunt. It cannot follow the group. It cannot keep itself warm or fed. For it to survive weeks of that, someone had to carry it, keep it warm through the nights, drip water into its mouth, clean it, hold it through the seizures, for weeks. Nobody does that for a tool. You do not nurse a garbage scavenger through a month of seizures because it is useful. A sick puppy is the opposite of useful. It is a drain, food, water, warmth, and attention poured into an animal that gives nothing back and will probably die anyway. They did it anyway. 14,000 years ago, before farming, before writing, before cities, a human being sat up through the night with a dying puppy and refused to let it go. And when it finally did die, or when they did, someone made sure they went into the ground together. That is not domestication. That is love. And it is the oldest physical proof of it we have ever pulled from the earth. Here is the question that grave forces on you. Was this a freak? One unusually soft-hearted family in one corner of ancient Europe? Because if it happened only once, it is a beautiful accident. But if it happened again, somewhere else, with different people, in a different land, then it is not an accident at all. It is something human. It happened again. Far to the south, at a site called Ain Malaha, in what is now northern Israel, archaeologists uncovered another grave, this one around 12,000 years old. An elderly person, curled on their side, and tucked beneath their hand, resting against their body, the skeleton of a young puppy. The hand was placed on the animal, a last gesture frozen for 12,000 years. You do not need a translator for that pose. Every human alive understands what a hand resting on a sleeping animal means. Two graves, two continents, thousands of years and hundreds of miles apart. The same impossible tenderness, pressed into the ground by people who never met and never could have. This was not one soft family. This was our species, quietly deciding again and again that these animals were not food and were not tools. They were ours. We grieved them. But while you sit with the warmth of that, something colder is happening in the background of the story. Something nobody at those gravesides could have noticed, because the animals in the ground were no longer wolves. Not exactly. Living beside humans for thousands of years had not just changed how they behaved, it had begun to change how they were built. Look closely at early dog remains across these sites, and a pattern creeps in. Shorter snouts, smaller teeth, different skull shapes. The wild was draining out of the body itself, not just the temperament. And that raises a question that sounds simple and is not. Why would becoming friendly change the shape of an animal's face? Why should a calmer mind come with a softer skull? There is no obvious reason those two things should travel together, and yet, everywhere animals grow tame, they do. To understand why, And to understand what it might quietly have done to your own face, we have to leave the ancient graves behind. We have to walk into a frozen research station in Siberia, where one scientist spent 40 years breeding the wildest animal he could find, asking one question, and got an answer that nobody saw coming. It started with a fox.
Can you breed an animal for one single feeling and accidentally redesign its whole body? In 1959, in Soviet Siberia, a geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev decided to find out. He worked at a research institute near Novosibirsk, and he chose, of all animals, the silver fox. If you have never met one, picture a creature that wants nothing to do with you. Wild foxes on a fur farm are not cute. They snap, they lunge, they scream. Handling them is a fight every single time. That hostility was exactly why Belyaev picked them. And there was a second danger, one that had nothing to do with the foxes. This was the Soviet Union, where the study of genetics had been branded a crime against the state. Scientists who believed in genes had lost their jobs, their freedom, sometimes their lives. Belyaev ran his experiment partly in disguise, calling it a study of physiology, because the real question he was asking could have ended him. His question was simple. He took his foxes, and he selected for one trait, and one trait only. Not size, not coat, not strength, just this. How calmly does the fox tolerate a human hand? The friendliest few % of each generation were allowed to breed. Everyone else was not. That was the entire rule. Reward the calm. Repeat. What happened next is one of the strangest results in the history of biology. Within just a handful of generations, the foxes started to change, and not in the way you would expect. Yes, they got tamer. They stopped snapping. They let people pick them up. But that was the part Belyaev was breeding for. The rest, nobody asked for. Their ears went floppy. Their tails curled up over their backs. Their coats broke out in patches of white, spots and stars, like a dog's markings. Their snouts got shorter. Their skulls got smaller. Some started breeding twice a year instead of once, and they began to do things no wild fox does. They wagged their tails when humans came near. They whimpered for attention. They licked hands. Read that list again. Floppy ears, curly tails, spotted coats, short snouts. Belyaev never selected for a single one of those things. He selected for friendliness. The body came along for free. His foxes had turned into something that looked and acted eerily like dogs in the span of a human lifetime. The experiment outlived Belyaev himself. His colleague, Lyudmila Trut, carried it on after his death, and it has now run for more than 60 years, the same result deepening with every decade. Tameness in. Floppy-eared, tail-wagging, dog-like animals out. So why? Why on earth would choosing for a calm mind drag along droopy ears and a spotted coat? What do a fox's emotions have to do with the shape of its ears? The leading answer hides in the embryo. Very early in development, a special bundle of cells forms along the back of the growing animal. They are called neural crest cells, and they are travelers. They migrate out across the body and help build an astonishing range of parts. The pigment in the skin, the cartilage in the ears and snout, parts of the skull, and, critically, the adrenal glands, the organs that flood the body with fear and aggression. Here is the trick. When you breed for tameness, you are quietly breeding for fewer or slower neural crest cells, so the animal grows up with a calmer fear system. But those same cells also color the coat, shape the ears, and build the snout. Turn them down to soften the mind, and you unavoidably soften everything else they touch. The floppy ears are not a bonus feature.
They are a side effect of a quieter brain. Tameness and a cuter face are wired to the same switch. And that is the moment this stops being a story about foxes. Because there is one more animal that shows this exact cluster. Smaller teeth than its ancestors, a flatter, shorter face.
A more delicate, rounded skull. Reduced, heavy brow ridges. A long, slow childhood. And a dramatically lower tendency toward reactive aggression than its closest wild relatives. That animal is you. Compare a modern human skull to our older relatives, to the Neanderthals, to earlier humans. Ours is softer, lighter, more childlike. Our faces are flatter, our brows smaller, our jaws weaker. We look, in the language of this experiment, domesticated. The Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham has built an entire case around exactly this, that somewhere in our past, our species turned the same switch on itself. We did it through who we chose. Across countless generations, the humans who were too reactive, too violent, too quick to threaten the group were pushed out, punished, or simply not chosen as mates. The calmer, more cooperative ones thrived and bred. We were running Belaev's experiment on ourselves, without a lab, without a plan, selecting our own kind for friendliness, generation after generation. And the same side effects followed. The softer face, the smaller teeth, the longer childhood. You did not just tame the wolf. As you tamed it, the very same process may have been taming you. So you and the animal at your feet are not just companions. You may be two species that walked down the same strange road, both growing gentler, both keeping the faces of children into adulthood, shaped by the same invisible hand. But behavior and bone are only the surface. The deepest part of this bond is not in the skull at all. It is in the blood. A single chemical loop that fires every time you and your animal simply look at each other. And once you understand it, you will never look at your pet the same way again.
When your animal looks into your eyes, what is actually happening inside both of you? It feels like nothing. A glance. Your dog rests its chin on your knee and looks up, and you look back, and something in your chest goes soft. You have done it 10,000 times. You have never once thought of it as a chemical event, but that is exactly what it is. And the chemical has a name. In 2015, a team of Japanese researchers led by Takefumi Kikasui ran an experiment that sounds almost too simple to matter. They had owners and their dogs sit together in a room and do nothing but interact normally, talk, pet, and look at each other. Before and after, the researchers measured a hormone called oxytocin in both the humans and the dogs. You should know what oxytocin is because you have been swimming in it your whole life. It is the bonding hormone. It is the chemical that floods a new mother when she holds her baby. It rises with trust, with touch, with closeness. It is, as much as any single molecule can be, the feeling of love rendered as biology. Here is what they found. The longer a dog and its owner held each other's gaze, the more oxytocin rose. In both of them. Not one, both. The human's level climbed and the dog's level climbed, each feeding the other. A look from the dog raised the human's oxytocin. The human's warmth raised the dog's, which made the dog gaze more, which raised the human again. It is a loop, a self-reinforcing chemical loop of affection running on eye contact alone, with no food, no command, no trick involved, just a look. But the detail that should stop you is what they found when they ran the same test on wolves. Hand-raised wolves, socialized to people, comfortable around their human handlers. The loop
did not fire. The wolves did not hold the gaze the same way, and the oxytocin surge did not happen. Same closeness, same handler, no loop. Sit with what that means. This is not a generic mammal thing. This is not just animals near humans bond with humans. Something specific happened to the dog on the road from wolf that wired it into a chemical conversation with us, a conversation wolves cannot have. The dog evolved the ability to push our love button by looking at us, and we evolved nothing to defend against it because that button was never meant for them. Because here is the unsettling part. That oxytocin gaze loop is not a dog system. It is the system that bonds a human parent to a human infant. A mother and her baby lock eyes, oxytocin rises in both, the bond deepens. It is one of the oldest, most powerful circuits our species has, and the dog found a way in. It slipped through a door that evolution built for our own children, and it has been standing in that doorway for 14,000 years. Your dog does not love you like a wolf loves its pack. Your dog loves you and triggers your love through the exact machinery you use to bond with your own child. And it did not stop at chemistry. It went after your eyes directly. Look at a dog's face when it wants something from you. That melting, worried, big-eyed expression that makes you forgive it for anything. There is a real muscle behind that look. A researcher named Julianne Kaminsky found that dogs have evolved a small muscle above the inner eye that lets them raise their inner eyebrows, making their eyes look bigger, sadder, more infant-like. Wolves do not have it, or barely do. Think about what that means. Dogs did not just learn to act cute. They grew a new muscle in their face over thousands of years, whose only real job is to trigger the nurturing instinct in a human. That heart-melting look is not random. It is a tool evolved to aim straight at the part of you that protects babies. And it works. We pick the dogs that make that face. We always have. Now, the skeptic in your comments has one last move, and it is the most common one of all. My dog doesn't love me. It loves the hand that feeds it. It's just food. It sounds tough-minded. It is also wrong. And the experiments are why. The oxytocin loop fires from a gaze with no food in the room. The puppy eyes muscle works on strangers who have never fed the dog once. And the wolves, raised by hand, fed every day by the same people, did not bond this way at all. If it were only about food, the well-fed wolf would love you just as hard. It does not. Food does not explain the loop. 14,000 years of shared evolution does. So when your animal looks up at you and your chest goes soft, that is not sentimentality, and it is not a trick of yours alone. It is two nervous systems, two species, dropping into a chemical embrace that took longer to build than every empire in history combined. You are not imagining the bond. You are feeling the oldest collaboration your kind ever made. Which brings us back to where this all started, to a single, ordinary moment you have lived through 1,000 times and never understood. An animal at the edge of your bed, watching you wake up. You thought you knew what that was. A pet, a small comfort of modern life. You were wrong about almost all of it. And when you see that morning stare clearly for what it truly is and how far it reaches back, it stops being ordinary at all. Let's go back to that bed, one last time. How far back does a single ordinary morning actually reach? You wake up. There it is again. The animal at the edge of your bed, awake before you, watching you come back from sleep. This morning, look at it properly. Because you are not looking at a pet anymore. You are looking at the end of a thread, and the thread runs back further than almost anything else you own. Follow it backward, past the food bowl with its brand name, past the vet, the leash, the toys, past your grandparents and theirs, past the first king of your country, past the first coin, the first letter, the first brick of the first city. The thread does not stop at any of those. It runs straight through all of human history without breaking, and it keeps going, down into the dark before any of it existed. And it does not even start at the Bon grave. That 14,000-year-old burial is just the oldest moment of love we can hold in our hands. The bond itself is older. Genetic studies of ancient DNA suggest dogs and wolves began splitting apart tens of thousands of years before that. That the first calm wolves started drifting toward our fires while the great ice sheets still covered half the world. Think about who was alive at the other end of this thread. Not farmers, not villagers. People in small bands following herds across a frozen continent who had never seen a wheel or a field or a written word. People who owned almost nothing, and one of the few things they chose to carry, to feed, to warm, to bury, to love, was an animal that had once been a predator in the dark. Every one of those people is gone, completely gone. Their languages, their names, their faces, their gods, all of it erased so thoroughly that not a single word they ever spoke survives. The ice melted. The camps vanished. The fires went cold tens of thousands of years ago. But the deal they made did not die with them. It is still running.
It is running in your bedroom, right now, this morning. That is the part that should land. The thing watching you wake up is not a modern convenience. It is the living end of the single longest relationship our species has ever held with another. Older than agriculture, older than civilization, older than memory. You did not buy into it. You were born into it. You inherited it. And remember what is happening underneath the surface of that quiet stare. When your eyes meet its eyes, the oxytocin loop fires, the same circuit a mother shares with her infant, the one those Japanese researchers measured rising in both of you at once. The face it makes at you is shaped by a muscle it evolved specifically to reach the part of you that protects children. And the softness in its body, the floppy ears, the gentle face, is the same softness that Belaev's foxes grew, the same softness that may have crept into your own face as your kind tamed itself. You are not two strangers sharing a house. You are two animals that walked out of the wild together, growing gentler side by side, until you could not imagine the world without each other. The wolf changed. You changed. You met in the middle and stayed. And look how far that ancient deal has spread. There are close to 1 billion dogs sharing the planet with us now, on every continent people live on. There is almost no human culture anywhere on Earth that did not independently choose to keep animals close. The bond is not a quirk of one people or one place. It is everywhere our species is. We carried it with us into every corner of the world. And it shaped their minds as much as their faces. Point at something across a room, and your dog will look where you point. It reads the meaning in your hand. That sounds trivial until you learn that our closest living relatives, chimpanzees, mostly cannot do it. The same researcher behind Survival of the Friendliest showed that dogs read our gestures and our eyes better than our nearest primate cousins do. They did not just move into our homes. They learned to read us, closer than family. And here is the quiet weight of it. You are not the owner in this story. You never were. You are the latest keeper of a bond you did not start and will not finish. It was handed to you across more generations than you can count by people who would not recognize a single thing about your life, except this one, except the animal at the edge of the bed. That they would understand instantly. That they would recognize as their own. So tomorrow, when you wake and it is already watching you, you will know what you are seeing. Not a pet, not a possession, not a small comfort of modern life. You are seeing the other half of the oldest friendship your species ever made, still keeping its side of a promise made by people who are dust. It came in from the cold 14,000 years ago and longer. It never left, and every morning it is still there at the edge of your bed, waiting for you to wake up. Not because someone trained it to, but because a very long time ago, in the dark, beside a fire, your kind and its kind decided to keep each other. And you still do.